Hello, this is the sixth part of my notice to the Universal Postal Union, really reminding them, if they weren't totally aware of it, of their authority to actually abolish governments, military, the courts. What a relief to know that there was someone to send this massive body of grounds to do this and to perhaps stop this train of destruction that they have in mind for us. So where did I get to? The Universal Postal Union can recognise that the takeover by maritime law has been facilitated by fraudulent contracts that have brought great hardship to people in favour of corporate entities and left people with no recourse to the law. The Universal Postal Union oversees maritime law, and you will remember that this law was only supposed to make international commerce and trade contracts possible. It was not supposed to provide peace and justice, but it certainly was not intended to facilitate mercenary wars and complete lockdowns orchestrated to be a captive market for new mRNA pharmaceuticals and other harmful technologies, since corporations cannot be held liable and their agents are now completely indemnified. This reduced the power of common law courts, and very few now still exist. The International Criminal Court is fully booked for more than 10 years, dealing with cases of vaccine deaths and other corporate COVID crimes. This is why I've suggested a mea culpa, which is a self-blame decree, as it allows the Universal Postal Union to publicly relinquish diplomatic immunity and then publicly explain why the right to privileges has been so dangerous and are having to be withdrawn from officials from other international organisations. The list can start with the claim that wars are being started for mercenary objectives. This involves governments deploying troops and launching strikes and offensives deliberately to escalate hostilities and justify wartime measures, military spending and mass displacement of populations, all in order to extract the rich resources of the land they have identified. Secondly, the Universal Postal Union can admit and declare that many documents and communications delivered by post from banks, councils, insurance, debt collectors and summons from courts should not have been delivered. By explaining that the Post Office Service is complicit in hiding the truth of our jurisdiction, by choosing to overlook even blatant postal fraud like wrongly addressed, uncancelled postage stamps and the four-corner rule that in effect takes whatever is written in a box off the page, every form sent out to us has trapped us in this way, and the Universal Postal Union must make amends. I hope you, Masahiko, are as excited about this opportunity to turn this huge ship around and sink it, but close enough to the shore that the people can recover any treasures that the elite might have wanted to take with them. Artificial intelligence as a retaliatory tool to be quietly avoided by communication outside the digital realm. I want to warn you before you think of sharing this enormous task with the International Telecommunication Union. The breakdown of the admiralty jurisdiction must be conducted only by physically recorded delivery of the Universal Postal Union's decisions and instructions. Telecommunication has been hijacked in its entirety for its capacity to conduct radiological weapons against us and extract the information and energy the corporations need from our body's electrical fields. For example, the Indonesians, with some other good men and women from other countries, succeeded in stopping a deployment of 200 million breeding biting mosquitoes containing IP technology coupled with Microsoft AI technology. The evening of the postponement was agreed. The same Microsoft AI technology identified and bombed an Indonesian maternity hospital in Gaza. Furthermore, the World Health Organization's environmental and human health assessments for the mosquitoes and everything else were conducted by the same AI technology, and the maps of where the insects were to be deployed in homes at 50-metre intervals were generated by the same Microsoft artificial intelligence. Having seen AI-generated risk assessments, I am very concerned about how governments, customs and excise have all handed their social, policing and regulatory decisions to artificial intelligence. The fact that AI always concludes that whatever it wants to do holds a minimal risk. Governments and councils have automatically agreed to an influx of smart cities, meters, masts, drugs and devices on the basis of artificial intelligence, and contrary to all consent, wishes, knowledge base and well-being of the people. We should not have to prove that the human population is being slaughtered in their homes, but there is a mountain of evidence for the intended excess deaths annexed herein. As punishment for the people of Indonesia, the World Mosquito Programme, Bill Gates' bioweapons programme identified Bali as a new base for production. To contrast this with real communication, not one single minister, planning officer, community leader, business owner or other man or woman had been consulted about the proposed releases. Even the man Marjan from the Oswald family, acting as your deputy, is determined to bring in artificial intelligence and logistics 4.0. Please tell him that we say a categorical no. It is the duty of legal advisors to always advise a client that it is not advisable to enter into contractual relations with those enjoying diplomatic immunity. Now, just think about this. The whole world, every single United Nations member state was just about to and is about to resume discussions with a whole lot of bodies, World Health Organization, World Economic Forum, United Nations, every single one of them, and within our own countries, enjoy diplomatic immunity. And any legal advisor has to advise not to enter such a contract. All the United Nations bodies, World Economic Forum, and indeed Universal Postal Union staff enjoy immunity from suit and legal process. In fact, it is the like inviolability of residence as is accorded to the envoy of a foreign power. Even spouse and children are exempt from income tax and can simply refuse to pay for services or even commit violent offences and still not be able to be charged. That is why it is the duty of legal advisors to always advise a client that it is not advisable to enter into contractual relations with those enjoying diplomatic immunity. The contracts that envoys, lawyers and doctors have been asked to enter into are international political declarations, financial agreements, up to billions and billions, 30 billion was one figure, the first figure that comes to mind, and legally binding regulations which amount to treasonous acts against their sovereign nations and nationals. Meanwhile, the corporate institutions retain their inviolable immunity from liability. It must be made known that all international trade deals and all national government legislation are to be ignored as null and void. These are international trade agreements like TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, that allows corporations to sue governments for reneging on a deal, even, for example, when the seaweed resources were already owned by traditional seaweed harvesters with inherited rights and should not have been sold by the government, and also that mechanical harvesting has been shown to destroy the marine ecosystem, which, as you will know, provides up to 80% of our oxygen at certain times of year. These are the sorts of deals that are being made, and this is the most heinous of all, that allows the injection of already more than half the world's population. We are grateful that the Universal Postal Union has the capacity to deliberate for us. The international organisations are still pretending that we are somehow acquiescing to their government. We are not. We are just having great difficulty getting the organisations to acknowledge our complete rejection of their government. Thankfully, you, Masahiko, and your post office network do still have an obligation to deliver what you promised to deliver through international treaty. One of those original agreements the Universal Postal Union made is that you will provide resolution in the instance of lack of jurisdiction and absence of resolution in the admiralty courts. This matter of corporate interests overriding public interests is based on a very gross and deliberate misunderstanding of jurisdiction. It is causing very real pain to all the people and the spirit of the world. I do not know if you are a man who feels empathy for all sentient beings, or maybe you have a respect for the spirits as many Japanese friends do through the Shinto teachings. In whatever way your principles guide you personally, it is important to feel this pain felt by all humanity, as it is a misunderstanding caused and perpetuated to some extent by the Universal Postal Union and needing careful resolution. Will you make sure the Universal Postal Union provides a resolution to this matter? The knowledgeable judges of the Federal Supreme Court, attorneys and other officials knew not to tamper with a case brought by a UPU registered living woman. No courts in any land can deal with my jurisdiction. Nonetheless, every court is allowed to ignore our jurisdiction in the same way as every other privileged official and administrator is allowed to ignore our jurisdiction for their commercial advantage and hold us fraudulently in debt and criminalised as underperforming assets. Apart from the courts denying our jurisdiction, each judge has followed their own bias to what extent they temper commercial law with the token acknowledgement of the lives affected. For example, a US court removed the rights of COVID-19 injections to be called a vaccine, as they do not prevent infection or spread. Another court labelled the injections as a bioweapon, and other countries like Brazil continue to make the COVID injections mandatory to children. If the UPU finds a way to ignore this notice and appeal in regard to extensive unresolved cases of civil, criminal, patent and administrative law, we the people will have to accept that you are no longer acting in honour, but instead consciously complicit in this outright betrayal of the human race. Even if you were threatened into inaction initially on the dismantling of the incorporated system and institutions, we insist you find a way to do it. For some reason that I cannot explain, I feel confident that you as a man are going to step up and sort this out. For myself, I received a spiritual calling and assurance from the priests of the gods Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva that my vision for freedom for humanity and animals would be successful. For you, it might be love for your family or your professional skills, as well as destiny, that encourage you as you work out how to orchestrate this lawful correction for the uplifting of all men and women. The 25 counts of criminal fraud on a global level have been ignored. These are the 25 counts in the appeal that I attached with this notice. My appeal highlights that the sovereign decisions communicated through the Universal Postal Service and through the International Telecommunications Union, using numerous secure platforms by all members of the Universal Postal Union, have been ignored. Reservations are an instrument which have always been a central element in making an international agreement. In the recent pandemic and sustainability negotiations, countries are not allowed to note reservations to their agreement. Indeed, the counts of rejection, objection and non-consent outlined in the attached appeal did not receive even a spoken acknowledgement, let alone a written receipt, let alone a response, let alone were nations or groups of nations able to call for a review or due diligence by the United Nations bodies, let alone did the defendants cease and desist their nefarious activities. Unjustly and in contrast, the people have been led to believe we must respond to our post and deal with our paperwork. We the people cannot ignore the post that arrives to our homes, even though it is fraudulently addressed to a legal fiction, even though we know the letters are means to wrongly extract payment from the men and women living there. Banks, council, governments and international would-be lawmakers like the World Health Assembly, on the other hand, can ignore multiple conscientious objections to their proposed agenda. This is a failure by the Universal Postal Union. It goes against your principles, surely, that the Postal Service is only facilitating fraudulent contracts between corporations and good people. Surely the UPU Constitution reminds us that the treaty and all laws were and should always be founded by unincorporated people. control, cancellation, gagging orders, censorship, and the UPU. Millions of people are united with you and your decentralised staff in only recently understanding how the postal fraud has facilitated tax and bank fraud. Many will still not understand that the manufacturer's hostilities and inequality between us have also been fostered by the UPU's complicity and the people's acquiescence. We recognise with you that commerce is no longer commerce, but an industrial military complexity. Luckily, in simple terms, premeditated genocide is an activity that is prohibited in all jurisdictions. Therefore, please do not let anybody tell you that the Universal Postal Union does not have the authority to remove the power from them. You absolutely do have the authority. I intentionally did not say remove them from power because the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, NATO and anyone who is used to being able to throw their weight around will inevitably want to throw their toys out of the pram, leaving their mothers even more mess to clean up. This is only an analogy, but the facts are that over half the world's population have been injected with or have consumed Gates Foundation IP biotechnology. Men have microplastics in their testicles and women have microplastics in their baby's placenta. So coming back to the analogy, where people are the mothers managing the corporation's tantrums at being told the world does not revolve around them, the people already have a big enough mess to clean up without setting them off on a retaliation. The alternative is that the UPU can instead remove the power from the corporate institutions by circulating the truth. It can be a simple truth series and make sure it is translated into every language and delivered to all men and women and all institutions in the postal territory. Let our jurisdiction be known and celebrated. Let the fraud be admitted and stopped without excuse or exception. Let the people know they do not owe any fraction of their income or time to corporations. Declare that war is over, as our lands and assets are to be returned, and there is no one who poses a threat to anyone else. Let the military themselves know that they have been fired and must go home and make new lives for themselves. We all will, or go on holiday, as we are free to travel. Let your postal announcements have a personal note. Everybody loves to receive personal post. Tell the people to pull out their rose-tinted glasses and start looking at the world for all the beauty it holds. Tell them the world is changing and that they'll love what they find as nature recovers and we start to make our own plans in the absence of legitimate government. Describe how, as the weaponized technologies, telecommunications and media are dismantled on a macro level and people are reminded to turn them off on a micro level, only good news, good health, gifts and joy de vivre will be arriving at our doors.